journeyed over mountains and fought my way through war zones. I struggled through deserts and prayed in sacred places.
Hello and welcome to the African Heritage Alliance YouTube page and our video channel. Warm welcome to everyone. If you've not joined us before, the African Heritage Alliance is really committed to stamping out any kind of injustice in terms of anything that disadvantages the African heritage community. So one of our public meetings that we've had is actually all about is politics the solution to Black Lives Matter? I'm a big believer that politics is a fundamental part of aiding the Black Lives Matter agenda. I think it's something that we as a community need to leverage in order for us to get the kind of political power and sway that we need. So, George, what are your views on politics being the answer to Black Lives Matter?
I think I agree with you, Amanda. I think the fundamental issues here is lack of power within our community. And we know we talk about lack of financial power, but a real power that we lack, and it doesn't really require anything more than us coming together with a sense of purpose of moving the story on in our community. And that power is political power. And we see that communities who've come to Leicester after us engage in mainstream local politics. And as a consequence, their community do really well. So I'm definitely in agreement with you, Amanda, that political power is a very important part of the piece of the jigsaw puzzle to help solve our community issues.
You mentioned, George, that financial power. Do you think you can have political power without financial power? Because I think sometimes that's the challenge that we have as a community, is that we don't have wealth, and therefore wealth equals power in a political stage. What do you think to that?
I think, again, you're right, but I think they're not Siamese twins. I think you can separate them, and I'm absolutely convinced that you can get political power, and through that create the right environment for financial power. And the reason why I say that is I can remember back in the 80s when Black people went to the bank wanting funds, they were definitely deliberately saying no to Black folks. Now, if there were laws in place that made that a situation where they couldn't do that, then of course you can see how Black people could have flourished and started flourish much sooner in the economic spheres. So I think they're not, as I said before, I don't think they're Siamese twins. And I think you can have them separate, but it's great if you can have both of them running alongside each other. Okay, Suzanne, your views, please.
Whilst I agree with what you said, I think it's also important that we're clear that people who don't have money have access to being able to influence what happens in their lives. And I think a lot of that will happen at a very local level. So it's about knowing who your counsellors are, knowing where their surgeries are or whether they're doing things online now, but knowing how you can get access to them so that you can raise any concerns that you have and ask questions and feel that you can influence what's happening in your local area. And the reason why we're having tonight's event, of course, is so that we've also got access to our politicians, our national politicians, so that they can then go back and influence what's happening in the House of Commons and above.
Thank you for that, both of you. The African Heritage Alliance have public meetings every month, the last Friday of the month. Our public meeting this evening, the October 2021 public meeting, we have the Right Honourable Dawn Butler, the Right Honourable Claudia Webbe, we have Councillor Dr. Deboroh Sangester, and we have our very own Councillor George Cole. So please watch the public meeting. Feel free to add your views and comments in the chat, and someone in the team will get back to you or add their views too. Thank you for watching, and we'll speak to you soon.
I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's meeting, and just to thank you for giving your time to join us for this evening's event, which, as you can see on screen, has the title of Is Politics the Solution to Black Lives Matter? So I'm sure that you've come armed with lots of questions. You'll have plenty of opportunities to ask throughout the course of the evening. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce Dawn Butler MP. Dawn has been an MP since 2005, and she is currently the MP for Brent Central in London. She's held a wide range of portfolios. So she's been the Minister for Young Citizens and Youth Engagement. She's had a portfolio for Black and minority ethnic communities, and also women and equalities. And I think, you know, her length of service as an MP and also that wide range of portfolios that she's held demonstrate that she's very tenacious and very principled. So I'd like to hand over to Dawn with a very warm welcome from African Heritage Alliance.
Hi, good evening, Suzanne, and good evening, everybody on the call. Well, I'm going to do even better than speaking for a long period of time because you haven't got me for a long time. I will take questions, but I will say this in regards to is politics the solution? Politics is always part of the solution because those people that hold the power, the political power, can make things happen. They can invest. They can decide what is spoken about, what's not spoken about. We know from this government that they try to stoke this culture war, which is essentially trying to undo any progress that's been made in regards to African, Caribbean, Asian people. So politics is always the answer, because when people say politics doesn't matter, if it didn't matter, then the government wouldn't try so hard to stop people voting. You know, the whole point of them having this voter ID is to stop people voting, to stop at least 3 million people from voting who haven't got voter ID, haven't got anything with that photographic ID on them. So, you know, if it didn't matter, they wouldn't want it so much. And sometimes I think we have to be smart and alert to that. Like, people will always try and disenfranchise us. And so we shouldn't disenfranchise ourselves. We should make sure that as many people as possible are registered to vote, as many people as possible are engaged in the political process, because it will happen with or without you. But 100% it will affect you more than it will affect others. So because I'm only with you till about 7:30, I wanted to not talk for long, just in case you wanted to take some questions, and I'll happily answer any questions that people have got today.
Does anybody have questions for Dawn?
Yes, I do. I mean, there is the, I suppose, the old age problems about encouraging people to vote. It's really, in your view, what is the best way to actually encourage members of our community, and not just, you know, the members of our community as for the older people, but the young people within our community as well, who are of voting age, to actually go out there and vote? What can we as a community do to encourage our young people and our members of the community to go out and vote?
Thanks, Mabel. Well, there was something like 3 out of 5 Black people were not registered to vote, but 1 out of 5 white people were not registered to vote. There was a statistic, something like that, that shows, you know, the huge gap in terms of people who are registered to vote. But it's also habit forming. So if people vote from the age of 18, the likelihood is they will continue to vote for the rest of their life. So it's very much habit forming. So we have to make sure that we encourage people to start voting. And there's other things that can be done in terms of the schools and all that engagement that can help. When I'm on the doorstep and somebody says, and it's often the people that need politics the most, you know, that need things to change, that they're not engaging. And when people say, you know, well, I don't vote, and I often just talk about Mandela. You know, the reason why Mandela was in prison was because he was fighting for the right for Black people to get an equal vote. That is why he was in prison. And I think people sometimes forget that. You know, they're like, I support Mandela, but do you really? Because if you did, you would support that legacy of us using our vote. Even if you want to spoil your ballot paper, you know, we should vote. We should let our voices heard, because if we don't do it, somebody else will do it, and somebody else will take your voice. So I would say, you know, quote back what is necessary. Or if people say, you know, we need different politicians, well, vote for them. You know, you have the power of your vote. It is powerful. There are constituencies where if Black people were united in their vote, they can determine who their member of parliament is. That is the power of the vote. You know, and every vote matters. I lost a selection once by 4 votes. Every vote absolutely matters.
And is that a message that you feel is easy to get out? And is that something that you've been able to do successfully, Dawn, within Brent?
Oh yeah, Brent's done really well in terms of mobilization and getting people ready to vote. And you know, it's everybody, but you know, I'm pleased to say, like, the majority, like, you know, my people come out, you know, and they campaign. And you know, everywhere there's a campaign, from, you know, the West Indian food shop to the barber shop to just, you know, the football teams. But it's also because I'm very active as well. So I will, you know, I am very active. And it feels good. It feels good to know that you're representing, and it feels good. And I think people feel good knowing that they've played a part in that, in getting me there. Because the time when I lost an election, you know, people didn't realize how important it was to come out and vote. And that was just, you know, by 1,000 votes. And so every single vote counts. It's so vitally important.
How do you think we can get Black young people to become more politically literate and involved? I emphasize the word literate.
Yeah, I think we have to link politics to everyday life and actions. You know, what's actually going on in society and in the world. So when people are complaining about certain things happening, whatever that might be, there is a political solution to that. So if people are complaining that Black history isn't taught in schools, there's a political solution to that. So everything has a political solution. And, you know, young people are, which we should be, uncompromising and, you know, just wanting to change the world. And part of that has to be through politics. So, and it's just linking all of that together and them understanding their power. There was a young guy that stood for Mayor of London, a social influencer, and he didn't lose his deposit. You know, 10 grand deposit. He didn't lose his deposit, whereas some well-known names lost their deposit, didn't get like 5% of the vote. So it's important for them to understand that there is, you know, there is power in the pen.
Dawn, it's obviously wonderful to see you. I've admired you over the years, sitting next to Jeremy Corbyn, and I was. It's obviously wonderful to see you here, although virtually. You have quite a checkered career in politics in North London, Brent. How have you seen? Because obviously we are trying to connect this back to Black Lives Matter, and whether, you know, if we go back to the ask, what have you seen has changed from the time you were elected to what you've done over the years until where we are now? What have you seen has changed, especially within the Black community, where you are a prominent member of?
The willingness to discuss racism in some areas, I suppose that's been a change in terms of people understanding, you know, the use of white privilege, the use of white supremacy, you know, all of that language is more widely used now. And that's why, you know, the Tories and the government are trying to claw all of that back, saying, oh no, you can't talk about that. You know, you're going to go to prison if you talk about white privilege and all of that rubbish from the government. So I think that, I suppose, has been the most change. In regards to like racism or anything like that, there's still, you know, an awful lot of racism that we have to combat. And there definitely isn't a fast enough change in that. But what I worry is that if we don't, and it's exhausting. I mean, I'm sure every single one of you on this call are exhausted, you know, talking about racism, having suffered racism. But if we don't talk about it, and if we don't engage, and if we don't like connect on the issue, then it will just go back to, oh, we've ticked that box, so that's, you know, that's okay. We've done that, so that's okay. Or we've done unconscious bias training, that's, you know, that's okay. And it will just be like a little tick box exercise. And we've got to move things on from organizations and people thinking they can just tick a box and it's all sorted. There has to be a pipeline of progression. There has to be systematic and structural change. And so we have to push that.
Can I ask a slightly different question, making it broader? Within the House of Commons, there are other Black MPs, and I'm just wondering to what extent you work as a group, Dawn, to try to address these issues, which then also gives you support as individuals.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we could work better as a group. You know, we can work better as a group, but in some areas we work together, but and it's great, like it's great having more Black MPs, especially like female MPs. It kind of means that sometimes I don't have to, you know, worry about that issue because I know somebody else is going to pick it up. It means I can tackle another issue. There's so many fires that we have to put out. It's a, you know, it's just phenomenal. But it's all done on purpose. You know, they do it to hope that we give up. And so we can't give up. So we can do better working together, but we do work together.
One of the issues that I've come across, and I'm sure other people have come across, is with the word Black Lives Matter. And that is not just among people of the majority population of the white people, but also some among a few of our own African heritage people. How would you go about describing to people about, I mean, you would have thought the plain word Black Lives Matter in the context of the society we live in and how the experiences that we go through, you know, the inequalities and so on. How will you go about expressing or explaining to somebody who says, well, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter?
I mean, there's some good sort of analogies out there, isn't there? Like, if a house is on fire on the street, you know, the fire brigade will come and put that house out. And you can say, well, all houses matter. You're like, yeah, but this house is on fire. So we have to put that fire out first. We have to deal with that fire. Or if you have broken your arm and you go to the hospital, you know, you can say, all my bones matter. Be like, yeah, but you got a broken arm. So we have to deal with the broken arm because that is more important at the moment. And so like anything like that, where of course all lives matter, of course it does. We're not saying that. We're not saying that, you know, Black lives have to be elevated amongst other lives. What we're saying is at the moment, Black lives are being overlooked. We're being over-policed. We're being underestimated. We're being under-promoted. And in fact, if we fix a situation for Black people, we will also fix the situation for white people, for women, for LGBTQ plus community, for disabled people. We will fix the situation for everyone. So, you know, fixing a situation for a Black person means that you'll fix a situation for everyone. And, you know, a lot of that has come out with the police. You know, Black people have said that there's been a problem with the police for the longest time. And, you know, change has been painfully slow, you know, and now, you know, now a police officer has been found guilty of murdering and raping a woman, you know, specifically using his powers as a police force. You know, there's a lot more attention to how the police needs to be changed sort of structurally. So, yeah, if we fix it for us, it will be fixed for everybody. So it's in everyone's best interest to help make Black Lives Matter as much as other lives. I'll leave you some words. There's civil rights activist John Lewis. He said, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. We used to say that ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is a struggle of a lifetime, or even many lifetimes. And every one of us from every generation must do our part. And if we believe in the change that we seek, then it's easy to commit to doing all we can. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble, because the responsibility is ours alone to build a better society and a more peaceful world. John Lewis.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. That's really kind of you to have picked that out, because it resonates on so many levels. As you say, it's about all of us getting involved, I'd say regardless of age or background. I think it's also about getting allies involved, because if you have other people fighting on your behalf as well, it makes it easier. But the critical thing is that we need to do it for ourselves, and then it needs to be that commitment and energy behind it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you've said very clearly, one very effective way of doing that is by making sure we get the right people representing us in Parliament. So thank you very much indeed for what you are doing on behalf of our community, and also thank others who are not here this evening in the same way. And we're really, really grateful that you've joined us, Dawn, and shared some of your thoughts. You'd be very, very welcome to come back again, and I'm sure that we will be inviting you back again. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I look forward to it. And you're right, allies are vitally important. So we should be each other's allies, most definitely.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Dawn. Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. So we will move on now to Deboroh Sangester, Councillor Dr. Deboroh Sangester. And we just want to thank you so much, Deboroh, for joining us this evening when you are clearly unwell. We really appreciate your commitment, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
What do we mean by politics? My political awakening occurred when I was about 12, because George Lindo was framed by the police in Bradford for a burglary, a robbery he did not commit. And at that time, politics was, and I think should also be, about engaging communities in their own struggles. So if we are beginning now, God help us, to think that politics is only what happens in the Conservative Party or the Lib Dems or the Labour Party, I think we are short-sighted. I agree with Dawn when she said we have to engage people where they are. But I don't think that parties are able to do that. One of the things that my dad, who is absolutely fantastic, which goes without saying, my dad said is learn to dance a yard before you dance abroad. Now, what does that mean? That means practice your politics in the settings where you are. So instead of trying to get people to join the Labour Party, join the Conservative Party, join one of the voluntary sector organisations. What enthuses you? What moves you? What change do you want to see? So we need to engage people where they are, rather than trying to force feed them a party line. We need to understand where people are, what their motivations are. So the voluntary sector, a black-led, more particularly, the black-led voluntary sector in Leicester has been decimated. It was, to be fair, the decimation started before I became a councillor anyway. So sometime around 2007, 2008, the black-led voluntary sector was whittled away. And we didn't have the broad swell of people to engage in the arguments about it. So how do you learn to dance abroad outside of your community if you haven't yet mastered the dancing that's needed in your own communities? Now, for people who go to church, there are myriads of ways to engage in the community struggle from a church base. For people who are interested in football, again, because there are myriads of ways for people to engage in politics there too. Because ultimately, politics, whatever that looks like, follows us because we are Black. So the political engagement of individuals in parties is one thing, but the political engagement of people in fixing their own lives is equally, if not more important. And from that base of understanding how politics works is how we will get more people to engage in the party political processes. But we can't, I don't think, but we can't just reduce political engagement to Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems. I think we need to broaden our understanding of that. Sometimes, of course, we as Caribbean African people are our own worst enemies. So any opportunity that we get to decry somebody who's putting themselves forward is seized upon, like sport. And that can be rather disheartening, I would have argued. But it's not about being disheartened. It's recognizing, I think, it's recognizing that the needs of the community are so broad. There isn't a sphere within which the African heritage community is not under attack. There isn't if we look at sports, if we look at education, if we look at health, if we look at housing, if we look at COVID, yeah, if we look at all of those things, there isn't a sphere in life that we're not under attack. And so we have to begin where people are, and to help our communities engage in community action, really. I know it's very 1970s, but to engage in community action, to join a board, to join a voluntary sector organization, to put themselves forward. I think that we can't lament the lack of engagement, lack of our political engagement in the political sphere without recognizing the impact on communities' feelings of self-worth and morale, the impact of the decimation of our voluntary sectors. You know, when again growing up, when I was growing up, there was always something to engage with, to practice with, to engage with, you know, like-minded people around a particular subject. I'm not sure that exists anymore. And so rather than trying to engage people in established political activity, and I'm talking politics of parties, we need to engage people in the politics, the activities of their lives, so that they learn that everything is politics, and they've learned to dance a yard before we are ready to dance abroad. I mean, of course, don't get me wrong, if the opportunity to have more Black and African heritage councillors were to come up, I would be the first to say, yes, go for it, absolutely go for it. But that shouldn't divert from the need for working with communities, the need for working with people whose voices are otherwise unheard in health, in education, in religion, in all of those spheres. So in summary, what I'm saying is we need to really think about, what do we mean by politics? It cannot be that politics is just what happens in town hall. Yeah, I think that we need to encourage people to join voluntary sector organizations, to join the church groups, to join something, to practice politicking around a subject of which they feel passionate. I think that's really important. I think we need to be able to work and understand people where they are. So it's easy to say, it's easy to say and dismiss that, oh, Black people are, what's that word? Not disenfranchised, not bothered. oh, black people are just not bothered and they're political apathy and No, I think that we can only say that there is a political apathy because there hasn't been a specific subject that we've been able to engage people in. But encouraging people to involve themselves in the lives of their communities, which is what the voluntary sector is really important and helpful. And we can't expect, or finally, we can't expect to go from a decimated voluntary sector to actively engaged community activists without some real work being done in the voluntary sectors, which are serving or trying to serve the needs of the communities that are underserved. Sorry, thank you, that's me.
Thank you very much indeed, Deboroh. And it's interesting to hear you take a different view, but one that is very inclusive, because what you have described is a system whereby everybody, if they wish to, could actually get involved and help to make a difference. So I think it's, just thank you very much indeed for raising this as an issue and taking a different view of what politics is. I think that's really going to enrich the discussion. So over to George.
Well, good evening, everyone. And it feels strange sitting in this seat this evening, but I'll do my best to share my thoughts on whether I think politics is a solution to Black Lives Matter. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that in about 18 months' time, there will be local elections in the city. And we as a community often don't participate as fully as we should do. And as a consequence of that, often we're left out of the mainstream political loop in the city. And it is my strongest belief that we should make every effort to get into the mainstream politics within the city. And how do I think this fits into the Black Lives Matter situation? I don't know if you can see my slides. Can you see my slide? Now, on that slide, you will see a number of pictures. And I think the idea that a picture paints 1,000 words is really quite relevant in terms of what this picture is telling us about politics and what it means. And the absolute truth is that there's no aspects of our life that politics does not touch. Recently, we all wanted to go away on holiday, and politicians told us we can't go away on holiday for whatever reasons. We go to the supermarket, we go there to buy stuff, all the stuff on the shelf, the supermarket itself, politicians have a decision in what goes on the shelf. Politicians have a decision in where the supermarket is situated. Schools, what goes on in the schools, politicians have a say in that. The curriculums in the schools, how children are treated in the school, where schools are built, if schools are built. In the workplace, again, politicians have a say in that. The big deal at the moment is the National Health Service. Who are making the big decision about that? Politicians. Who are making the big decision about how many houses we've got for people to live in and how many houses are being built for people to live in? Politicians. Who are making the decisions about the speed limit on the road, the cars that goes on the road, the safety of the road? Politicians. Who are making the decisions about renewable energy and the type of new renewable energy that this country is pursuing? Politicians. Yes, and politician does impact on what goes on in your bedroom. Absolutely it does. You'll know recently, not so long ago, rather, China had a one-child policy. Politicians are dictating to you, the population, how many children you can have. Politicians, such as David Cameron, was also arguing the case about how much money people with children should have for their first two child and subsequent children. Politicians are making those decisions. What goes on our television, politicians make those decisions. The content of our television, what we see on the screen, politicians make decisions that impacts on that. When we go in front of the judge, politicians impacts on the judges that we have in certain courts. And so that aspect of our life is impacted on by politicians. The police force governed and run by the politician. And so when we feel squeezed by the police force and we go to the police force and they don't respond to us, that is because the politician doesn't give them the room to respond to us in the way in which they should respond to us. I'm not letting them off the hook here because some of the police force are real racist. Who controls our foreign policy? Politician. Who decides whether we go to war or not? Politicians. Who decide if we can take our own life? Euthanasia. Politician. Who decide who can marry to who? Politicians. So I think you begin to get the picture that politician plays a massive role in our everyday life. The rubbish on the street, where we go for entertainment, global warming, the money in our pocket, all those are decided by politicians. They have a say in it. And when we say politics doesn't affect us, we really need to understand what we're saying, because we are missing the point. And the more politicians we have from the Black community in mainstream politics making those big decisions, is the better it will be for us as a community. And let me just sum this all up. The point is, politicians make policies, politician makes laws, and these two things affect every aspect of our lives. And we should be at the table there making these decisions, putting together these policies, being a part of the laws that impacts on our life in whatever way it impacts on us as individuals and our family collectively and our community in a much larger sense. And what I don't want to give the impression is that all politicians are there supporting the cause of Black Lives Matter, because we do know that there are politicians out there who are ridiculing people who are protesting against racism in their workplace. There's one of those politicians who seem to think that taking the knee, protesting against racism is just a politics. And yet she has the nerve to tell us that she suffers from racism, as if there's different classifications of racism. There's only one classification of racism, and all of us as non-white people suffer from it, and it impacts on us. And therefore, we do need to have the right politicians in the right places that is out there fighting the battle for us. I mean, I wouldn't say Jack Straw is one of my favorite politicians, but I have to say to you, after the Stephen Lawrence murder, when the police was doing absolutely nothing or very little to find out who the murderers are, it was Jack Straw who appointed the inquiry, which then led to the report, that very famous report, which then identified the racism within the police force and society wider. And I think Dawn made the point when she said that by fixing the problems for Black people, you also fix the problem for many other people who are suffering from the issues in society that racism, sexism, misogynism, and the rest causes. And I don't put Jack Straw up here as a good guy, but the point is, he was able to persuade the government at the time to do this inquiry. But the government had to be kicked by Nelson Mandela before they actually moved. And so the point is, politicians can bring about real and significant changes in our community. And politicians can be very divisive. Politicians can stir up hate within our community. And so we do need to understand the power that politicians have, not just to make policies, etc., but also to generate that mood in the community that is so divisive, so racist. And so what we can also find is that having the right politicians in the right places can make such a massive difference. And so when you have politicians like Barack Obama, who talks about creating a community of people of diverse color coming together and working for the common cause, getting rid of racism, talking about generating hope within our community, politicians has the powers to do that as well. And it is my absolute belief, when asked the question, is politics the solution to Black Lives Matter? I would say it is definitely a part of the solution to Black Lives Matter. And the problem that we have within Leicester City itself, if we had more politicians in key positions out there batting for us, we would, without a shadow of a doubt, find ourselves in a much better place. If we had more Black as well as white politicians flying the flag for Black Lives Matter nationally, we would be in a much better position. And Chair, there's a lot more that I can say on this. But at this point, I want to close my presentation and thank you all for listening. Thank you all for taking the time.
Thank you very much indeed, George. Okay, so in summary, I think what we've had so far is Dawn looking at things from her perspective of being in the House of Commons and, to some extent talking about the way in which Black MPs work together and what the issues are and making sure that people are engaged. Deboroh then had a very different take on it and was talking very much from a community basis and saying that everybody can and should get involved where they feel able to. And George has looked almost on a global level in terms of saying, yes, politics is important, and has taken us on a quick trot around the globe, in effect, but has given some very concrete examples of how politics influences everything in our lives. Okay, so with all of this information, over to the audience. What would you like to ask?
Searching for love.